Hashtag WNST. Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively going to take the Maryland Crab Cake Tour back out on the road beginning next week. All the information will be up on our social media by the middle of this week because I'm putting a whole calendar together for our friends at the Maryland Lottery. Have Raven scratch-offs to give away. It's been a lucky batch thus far. We had a lot of winners up at Hollywood Casino a couple of weeks ago. I was 8-6-1 against the spread this weekend, so I'm bragging about that a little bit. The Crab Cake Tour is also presented by our friends at Window Nation, 866-90 Nation. You buy two, you get two free. 5 years, 0% financing this month. They understand that the credit market's a little crazy. So, and so's the cold. When it gets cold outside, need windows. This is certainly the time of the year, and this is the week of the year that I'm glad I got in touch with my friends at Window Nation last year, and they've been a partner of ours. Also, the Maryland Lottery is in conjunction with our friends at Jiffy Lube. Jiffy Lube Multi-Care. They fixed my oil last week over Merritt Boulevard. I'm appreciative of that. There's a Jiffy Lube right around the corner from you. Go check them out. It's quick, better than ever. Jiffy Lube. Been doing that for a long, long time. Luke joins us now talking about a Ravens victory. So how dare we have the sky falling when they I don't want to say almost lose, but toy around with a 1-7 football team and a backup quarterback out in the desert. I think we pick these games apart very quickly, and then they move on, we move on. Seattle's coming this week, but this week's a little different. And this piece might be killed by 5:00, on Monday night. The trading deadline in the NFL, and this is only my second year being banned by the Ravens, but for 26 years, there were 26 Octobers and Halloweens that come and Halloween parties that come. Trading in the NFL was not something we ever talked about here. I think in the last 10 years, certainly been more a part of the game, the last 5 years, the last couple of years. But until we saw it happen here, and you and I spend the month of July, some years, not enough years, talking about the Orioles and the trading deadline and playoff positions. This was not something we talked about in a global sense with football, but it is a game changer when you can go get a player that can help you win. And I know Minnesota's in dire straits with a quarterback this week, and there's some other obvious buyers out there at 4-4, but it's 6-2. Come on, Luke. They need a running back, right? Like a real running back. That the sugar plums and dreams of Derrick Henry bringing that really, really attractive Houston Oilers jersey here this week would be that would be something, wouldn't it? I mean, in a bubble, that would be something that the Ravens would make a hardcore move.
Well, as is always the case, what are you giving up to do it? Certainly, I mean, the idea of Derrick Henry being paired with Lamar Jackson, it's fun. Does that mean they're winning the Super Bowl if they do that?
If I know they're doing this, if I have insider deal, I'll go to Hollywood Casino right now because the odds are going to the odds on the Ravens winning the Super Bowl will, I mean, and it's one player, but look, I saw what Gus did, and this can break into the whole conversation of what their needs are and where they are, but they need to run the ball better and more effectively. They do.
I'm much more concerned about them throwing the ball better. But anyway,
it
would be fun. It would be fun.
This is where I'm a jerk and say, you say they pass the ball really good. They're efficient. They're good at that. I think the run sets that up.
See, I think more and more teams that have success do it the other way around. I mean, Gus Edwards ran the ball 19 times. Yeah, 9 of those were in the fourth quarter because they had a lead. You throw the ball to win, you run the ball to protect your lead. I mean, that's really what the league has become. And look, the Ravens are an exception to that.
Unless you run the ball so well and they can't stop you, which was the 2019 team. Ghost of Marshall Yanda last week.
Yeah, until they petered out in the divisional round, and we've had the conversation ever since of how to get back to that point. But look, I'm not going to sit here and say that the Ravens wouldn't want Derrick Henry or I wouldn't want Derrick Henry, but at the same time, what's the asking price? And that's always what this comes down to. And it's so odd in the NFL. One, because you don't have a long history of teams making trades as we've seen them be more and more apt to do in recent years, with the Ravens being one of those teams right at the top of the list. I mean, quick, fire off all their trade deadline activity from 1996 through 2018. Eugene Monroe, and they made a couple other moves over the years, but not anything of major
They signed a
consequence.
lot of cut
But
players during the course of the season.
that's not the same thing. I mean, I'm talking about guys that Eugene Monroe, you remember him, right? Regardless of how it played out after he signed a long-term deal. But in the Eric DeCosta era, which is not that long, look at what they have done at the trade deadline. 2019, Marcus Peters. 2020, Yannick Ngakoue. Now, that one didn't pay off with the dividends that they envisioned, but it was still a move of significant consequence. And then, of course, last year, Roquan Smith, as we've talked about him being this force multiplier for, if not the very best defense in the league, one of the 2 or 3 best defenses in the league, and really has been from the going back to last Halloween. So, can they make a move with that kind of an impact? We're going to see how it plays out. If you ask me right now what I would want them to do, I'm still looking at an edge rusher, despite the fact that they've led the league in sacks and we've seen them do this fantastic job scheming up pressure. If you could add someone like a Danielle Hunter or, one of the edge rushers from Washington, which, I'm not saying that those guys are Myles Garrett, but you're still talking about Montez Sweat and Chase Young, who certainly have some upside that they would bring to this group. I'm still very tempted by that. Now, running back, Saquon Barkley's name's been thrown out there. The Giants have said they're not trading him. The Titans, there have at least been some reports that talked about them being tepid to the idea of trading Derrick Henry. And maybe the fact that they played their rookie quarterback and who threw 4 touchdown passes, maybe they're viewing themselves differently. I think the thing that makes me laugh, Nestor, and we saw this, there were reports going into Sunday's game with Washington, and hey, let's make fun of the Commanders. That's what we do here in Baltimore, right?
God, it was so last century.
This,
it's not even fun to make fun of them anymore, is it?
Oh, it's still fun. I mean, it's not as fun as it used to be, but it's still fun.
It was fun for me when I saw their jerseys, and I'm like, the hell RoboCop thing are they wearing? What is that? That's awful.
But the point I was trying to make is these teams that act like they don't know what they are, right? And they say, okay, well, if we win this week, we're going to buy or we're going to stand pat. But if we lose this week, we're going to sell. To me, that's where you have to look with a discerning eye and evaluate and go beyond just what your win-loss record is and say, okay, where are we as an organization? Where are we heading? Do we have a chance to win the Super Bowl this year or not? Where are we contractually? Where are we with the salary cap? Where are we with our draft picks next year? Those are all the things that factor in. And by the way,
there are 20 teams right now that can't win the Super Bowl, right? I mean, seriously, really, there are 12
probably
teams
more
that
than
are good.
Way more than that. There aren't 12 teams that are good enough to win the Super Bowl because there aren't 12 quarterbacks that you put in that category. I think
so
there's
anybody can be a seller of anything at this point if you're 3-4, right? I mean, just to say we got a linebacker at the end of, if the Ravens stunk, Patrick Queen would be a great example of a guy, or even Matabike, to say we're not going to sign him. Let's go get a 2nd-round pick for him this year. So as a general manager, not Eric DeCosta, who's got a job for life, or John Harbaugh, who's got a job for life. I'm talking about in normal organizations. You'd say, I need to save my ass and we need to get better next year, Joe Douglas, or I'm gone. I'm throwing Joe out because he's a friend of mine. I've seen the league, and as the world, everybody moves around, and this is the time of the year where you're coaching for your job in a lot of cases, and you're also general managing for next year because you can't win the Super Bowl this year, and everybody in your fan base acknowledges it's not the Bears' year. You know what I mean? I look down the roster, to your point. We think we're pretty good, but one of the parts of thinking you're pretty good is Pittsburgh sucks. Cleveland sucks. I mean, I'm looking at these other teams and saying, I watched Chargers, and I'm like, they're not as good as I thought as their bluster was and the TV commercials were in the summer,
Yeah. See, I'll disagree with you slightly in what not in your overall point, but this idea that, general managers and head coaches that you're talking about in that category, they don't have the luxury of saying next year. They're trying to save their butts right now. And while they can't win a Super Bowl necessarily, they could still make the playoffs. And you got to remember, expectations in every market and with every owner, they do vary, right? I mean, the New York Jets, they have no shot at winning the Super Bowl, right? Unless if Aaron Rodgers has a miraculous Achilles recovery and they sneak in as the number 7 seed, I guess someone will at least try to make that argument at some point in time. But the point is, a team like that, there would still be more value to them making the playoffs than how we would view that in Baltimore, or how they'd view that in Kansas City, or how they view that in Buffalo or Cincinnati at this point in time. So I agree with your point about coaches and general managers very much being in CYA mode, but I don't think that always equates to, oh, we're going to sell to try to get better for next year. No, in many cases, it's what happened with baseball this year with the Angels, where they had Shohei Ohtani, who was heading towards free agency, and they had been not terrible, but not good enough, but understanding that there's the allure of three wild cards in the same way that the NFL has that now over the last few years with playoffs expanding, that teams will try to talk themselves into, we can make a run. And that's why I said, for me, it was interesting to see Will Levis do in his first NFL start for the Titans what he did. He threw 4 touchdowns, looked better than how Tannehill's even looked this year. And now you have a Titans team that, look, I don't think they're going to be buyers, but they might be looking at themselves a little bit differently than they were 2 weeks ago. So that's why I do laugh, though, at how teams will look at how they fared in week 8 and then use that as the pivot point to say, oh, we're going to be buyers or sellers. And that's why it's just, the idea that if Washington had beaten Philadelphia on Sunday and suddenly the Commanders say, oh, well, we're going to explore being buyers, and we're sure not going to trade Chase Young and Montez Sweat. We're not going to trade our defensive tackles who are making a lot of money. That's crazy to me that you're going to let that hinge on the result of one game.
But you have a new ownership group there that's playing a whole different long game, in the same way that Sean Payton's got a job for life in Denver now, but from his contract, that he, he knows he can't win, but they won this week, and that feels good. I mean, I look at the Rams. They were the F the picks guys, right? Now all of a sudden they're 3-5, and like, for some of these teams, anybody on the roster should be available. And the Bears made that like really true last year when they gave us a linebacker that we would have had to, talking about the Orioles, we would have had to stunk for a season to get a player of that quality, right? To find that player, or to go in the open market and bid for that kind of player if that player hits free agency at the end of a season, to say, we get him for 8 games, we get him at a distressed level, maybe we give up a draft pick, and you sit around on draft day and twiddle your thumbs because you have Roquan Smith. But that doesn't make for bad press conferences with Derek DeCosta in late April, when you look up and you say, we have the guy I would say the best player on their team that they found at a yard sale that never existed in this league. And they're such a together organization in that way that they can play the long game with April draft picks that they know they're taking on behalf of Steve Bisciotti, where, to your point, a third of the league is nervous they're not going to be there, because at least a quarter of the league isn't going to be there. Whoever the general manager is today, 8 of those teams will have somebody different picking football players in April.
Right. And I'll say this, and look, it was a great trade, but the Ravens they gave up a 2nd-round pick for a rental of Roquan Smith for half a season. I mean, they gave up something.
Now, would you give up a 2nd-round pick to rent Derrick Henry?
No, probably not.
Wow. Okay. See, I'd have to think about that, because I think he is a game changer. If they bring him in, they are the Super Bowl front runner for me instantly. And that's not to put pressure on Eric or pressure on the old Houston Oilers jersey, which, by the way, we should just do a whole segment on how good they looked, and how wrong it is that they did it. I mean, it's
I was going to say, I can't even. Not. We'll get back on track for a second here. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I don't like that.
Okay,
right.
fair.
In the same way that I'll say, you know what? I applaud the Indianapolis Colts for wearing those hideous alternates that they should now adopt as their regular uniform, because they can move away from looking like the Baltimore Colts. But now, first of all, Kansas City would still be the favorite for me, even if the Ravens got Derrick Henry, because they have Patrick Mahomes. Best quarterback on the planet still matters. But it's intriguing. And what's the price? I don't think they're getting a 2nd-round pick for a rental of Derrick Henry. I just don't. Who really values running backs in that? I mean, we spent the entire offseason talking about running backs not being valued. Well,
then if
anymore.
You're not willing to give up a 2, nobody else is clearly not going to give up a 2, right? I mean, would he matter to someone's team so much in the running game unless they had a broken running back, right? I mean, literally.
Yeah.
With this team, in this scheme, with the way he could pound, it would really change the way I feel about the football team, Luke. And I think it would change how Vegas feels about the football team.
Okay. I mean,
And I don't know if there's anybody
and I
else out
guess
there. You could talk about edge rushers, and those will all be nice little Ngakwe, maybe Doomerville, maybe Javian Clowney, maybe. I don't know. I think that's cool and that's nice. I think Derrick Henry touching the ball 15 to 18 times a game and running downhill on your ass in December makes me feel a whole lot better about going into Buffalo or Kansas City in January. And I wouldn't give a rat's ass about that second round draft pick that sometimes turned out to be Arthur
okay.
Smith or bunch of guys I can't even remember, the safety Terrence Brooks. I mean, I'm trying to come up with the names. I'm getting old. It's been 30 years, but I understand the value of a second round draft pick, or I certainly wouldn't. I'm not talking a one, which would still be a low one for the Ravens to rent a guy.
Right.
And again, they had bigger visions for Roquan Smith as opposed to some of these
Sure.
baseball deals that happen just because they have a cheap owner that wants to get away and just pay the guy for 8 weeks, or in the case of, for the Orioles this year, have the Yankees pay your guy, right? That's even more fun. But the NFL trading deadline is much more, to your point, much more specific, much more complicated from a salary cap standpoint, and other issues. Pushing money around never seems to be a problem. And if they're ever going to push money around, this would seem to me, as I said earlier, to be a time to do that, because they're going to lose Matabike. They're going to lose Geno Stone. They're going to have some players. We talked about Patrick Queen for 8 months. They're going to lose some football players at the end of the year, and they're going to have some cap handcuffs in coming years. That when you're 6-2, and the thing I love about the team right now, Luke, this is the thing I love, and I want people call me the critic in this, and that's fine. I mean, that's what I should be doing. You and I should be arguing and disagreeing. They're healthy and they're good. They're good and they're healthy. That's dangerous, and that's when you go all in for me. Because to your point, things are going to go wrong. The pass rush thing that you come up with, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I mean, the Ajabo thing, and where Owe
It's pretty
is, and
important.
it's very important. But the
Pass
depth,
rush
to
is
your
pretty
point,
important. Yeah.
having more bodies there,
Yeah.
I'll sign up for another Kyle Van Noy, another player, another whatever the flavor of the Dematapeka, you know what I mean? Whoever that guy that's sitting out there, that's Terrell Suggs waiting to come back and, play 12 downs a week in that position, or 15 down in that sort of position. I love that. I love all of that. But that doesn't move Vegas for me the way a fat back in this offense would, a replacement for J.K. Dobbins. Like, really.
Yeah. Well, and let's be clear. Part of this is also, it doesn't necessarily have to be Derrick Henry. I mean, there are some other backs. Like, I'll throw a name out there that I would be intrigued by. But one, because I would be assuming that wouldn't cost as much as Derrick Henry, wouldn't cost as much salary wise either. Zach Moss has quietly had a really nice year for Indianapolis, and Jonathan Taylor's back now, and got paid, so he's their guy. Could you pluck someone like that for, I don't know, day 3 pick, something like that? Could that be a move that, look, isn't going to be the splash, and he's not the name of Derrick Henry, but is that something that could be, something that adds a little more, a little more of a dynamic quality to your running back room? Sure. I mean, we're going to see how this is going to play out. I mean, I think for the Ravens, I don't necessarily agree with you that it's all in the sense that we've just seen how Eric DeCosta has operated. If they weren't truly all in when Lamar Jackson was on a rookie contract, I don't see why you're suddenly going to change that philosophy now. Now, let's be clear. What all in means, what Snead and the Rams did 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, where you're just, reckless abandon, don't care about your draft picks whatsoever. The Ravens have never been that, and they're not going to do that right now. At the same time, we have
I don't
seen
think
them
giving
make
up
bold
pick
moves,
56 would, you know what I mean? Like, at this point, if
right,
that's what
sure.
you're
Well,
thinking,
and that's not going
to
all in
rent a
anyway.
guy that for 10 weeks can be a wrecking ball, can be a game changer. I
No.
count me in on that.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing on that. But at the same time, I guess the question is, how much better does Derrick Henry make you compared to the running backs that you have? Understanding that the offensive line is a big part of this equation. The whole notion of running backs not mattering that you hear football analytics types talk about, it's not that running backs don't matter. It's that offensive line play matters way more in the equation of how good your running back is than just saying, oh, we have Derrick Henry, or oh, we have Emmitt Smith, or we have Jim Brown, or that's what that point is. So,
And that's why keeping Patrick Ricard around was a really good idea. It looked like a good
sure.
idea late in the game on Sunday.
Sure. I mean, that's why people who were ready to say that he might not make the football team back at the end of summer, to me, that was crazy talk because you still wanted to have the ability to play some bully ball. But I guess for me, again, the question is not that Derrick Henry doesn't make you better. He obviously does. The question is, how much better does he make you? And how much is it going to cost you in order to do that? If it's dramatic improvement, then all right, maybe I'll hear giving up a third round pick for him. But that's also saying, okay, you don't think Gus Edwards is good enough, and Gus Edwards has been someone who's averaged 5+ yards per carry, each full season of his career. Now we'll see how this year plays
You want
out.
to see him carrying the ball
So
19 times a week the next 8 weeks, 9 weeks?
that means they're winning in the fourth quarter. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The Tennessee Titans have shown that you don't win Super Bowls with, a running back that you just hand the ball to 25 times. I mean, it's a different game in that way. Gus Edwards carried 19 times because they were winning in the fourth quarter. He carried 9 times in the fourth quarter. So, and again, anyone listening right now is thinking I'm hating on Derrick Henry. No, I'm not. Derrick Henry's going to be a Hall of Fame running back, whatever that is in the modern day. He's kind of been an exception to the rule, but what are you giving up to get him? And, I don't think necessarily acquiring him automatically moves them to the front of the line as the overwhelming Super Bowl favorite. It improves their chances, but it's still going to come down to this team being able to make plays through the air too, and that's part of it. So,
well, it's a nice debate to have at the trading deadline when you're 6-2 and it's like the Orioles this summer.
These are good
even
problems,
if they don't
right?
go out and get Max Scherzer, you still feel like, hey,
Yeah.
we're get a Flaherty, take a stab at it when you're 6-2 to improve something. But to your point, the Roquan Smith deal, they're not going to be giving up big time draft picks to rent players. I'm talking about, we only talked about one player. There's 30 or 40 players out there that are being dangled. I'm sure DeCosta's talking about 3 to 5 players on the phone as to what it would cost and how it would affect the team or impact the team, because Eric is a guy who utilizes this period of time and the assets of the organization. And if they don't make a move, I'm not going to be critical and say they didn't and they don't. It's going to be they didn't see the value that or Derrick, or to your point, Derrick Henry wasn't available, or the cap didn't make sense. But in my dream world, and I don't sit here and fanboy much about, the trades that are never meant to be. And we'll do this with the baseball team. My God, we could do a month of this, right? As to what they could do with Mullins, what they could do with Mountcastle, what they need to do to get ready for Holiday. I mean, they have all of those moving parts off season, but in season right now, when you're 6-2, and it's your August 1st, and you're good, and you're healthy, and you got big games coming up, and you have the possibility of getting a bye and playing at home in January for the first time ever. They've never played a championship game here, and I still look at that as being something that would. This is Baltimore positive. There'd be nothing greater. We're never getting a Super Bowl here. We're praying on a World Series. So everything in Philadelphia apparently this week after losing 2 games last week, because it was sitting right there. First time I poked you about that, or you and your whole family about that. But I still look at this and say this is a forward-thinking team at this time of the year. It's a beautiful thing that we can be discussing this possibility of getting the prettiest girl in the market to come here and play, because we did it last year, and they're a much better team today because of their open-mindedness of, we can get Roquan Smith. What's it cost? It's going to cost a lot of money, Steve. We have to write him a check. It's going to cost us Patrick Queen. But they made it work last year, and that's why they're in a position to win the Super Bowl this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and this is kind of what they want to do, right? I mean, and again, it's not even going all in because they've done this. They made the move for Marcus Peters. They made a move for Yannick Ngakoue, even though that one didn't turn out the way that he didn't make the impact that they hoped they would. So, we're going to see how this plays out. And you have the flexibility where, they don't have a lot of cap space currently, but they have a slew of deals, with their long-term big contract guys. They're not giving money back, but it's accounting, right? You just restructure it. You turn base salary into a bonus. You make some future cap years a little bit bigger for those players, but the cap's also continuing to go up. So they're going to have the flexibility to do it. It's going to be, how do they value it? who's available, how many teams are truly going to be sellers, and can you make a deal work? Again, I'm not anti acquiring Derrick Henry. I'm not anti acquiring Danielle Hunter. I'm all for it, but it's still got to be a move that you're going to make that makes you better, but you also don't want to compromise your future either. But because the idea is not to, they're not an all-in team. Eric DeCosta's talked about this. That's not who they are. They're going to be a team that wants to compete and contend and be in the playoffs every single year. And if you can make a move that's going to increase your championship odds, then they'll do it if it makes sense for them. But we've also seen them make trades where you say, oh, you trade Orlando Brown. It probably wasn't the best thing for the 2021 season itself. You trade Marquise Brown. It wasn't the best thing for the 2022 season itself. But long term, those moves are moves that, from a value standpoint, made sense and ended up being, maybe the Orlando Brown one, not quite as much, but certainly trading Marquise Brown and now having Tyler Linderbaum as your center, you'll sign up for that long term every day of the week. So, it's going to be a fun couple days here. And next time you and I reconvene, we'll be talking about either a move or a non-move, or probably a player that you and I didn't even mention today as we talk. And that's okay. I'll say this much: Roquan Smith, even a day or two before that move was made, it had been mentioned in passing, but that wasn't necessarily something that everyone was talking about being imminent. I mean, it was.
We didn't sit here
Jay
and do a
Glazer,
segment on whether we're getting Roquan Smith today.
I think Jay Glazer was the one who, I want to say, he broke that news, and that had been mentioned as like fans just throwing it out there. But I don't think anyone was looking at that in the way that fans are talking, and you and I are talking about Derrick Henry right now. So who the heck knows? We could be talking about Danielle Hunter or an edge rusher, a running back, maybe an offensive lineman, maybe an upgrade at left guard. Who knows? That might be the way that you try to improve your running game. So, we'll see how this plays out.
Luke, I'm trapped at home after having my credentials absconded, and I'm watching the 1 o'clock red zone, and I see Mike Caldwell with a call sign, and I'm thinking, I had to explain to my wife that, Mike Caldwell goes back to Ray Lewis, and you're equating Roquan Smith with draft picks and players and Tyler Linderbaum for Hollywood Brown. Hey, man, that's, we've got one general manager really with Ozzie and Eric, one mind of doing this for 30 years. I'll be shocked if they don't make some kind of move. You know what I mean? They're in the improvement business. Like you always say, Sig Mejdal, right? They're always in the improvement business. This is a time they can improve themselves. And if you hear this after a trade's made, it was a good debate either way. Luke and I are here, the Maryland Lottery, presenting our Maryland Crab Cake Tour. I'll have this back out on the road. Our friends at Window Nation, as well as at Jiffy Lube, putting it out on the road at places like Pappas. I was down in Greenville, South Carolina, having a beer before a Sammy Hagar show. Some people were talking to me. Oh, you're from Baltimore. We had some of them Poppy's crab cakes. And I'm like, you mean Pappas? Oh, we thought it was called Poppy's. And I'm like, oh, no, Pappas. So world famous. Our sponsors around here, we gave some love to Coco's as well for winning the competition at the 100.7 as well this week. So we're going to get it back out on the road for you beginning next week. Make sure you're at Baltimore Positive and checking all that out. I'm Nestor. He's Luke. He's in Owings Mills. We're here on social media, making it happen as well at WNST. Stay with us.